Hey everybody, it's EJ from iDesign.com, and today we are going to be learning how we can utilize the real-world physics engine inside of Cinema 4D to create some really cool 2D style animations. So always thinking outside of the box and how we can utilize the really powerful tools inside of 3D space in Cinema 4D and creating some really complex 2D animations that would take a very long time to create inside of After Effects alone. So let's check it out. All right, so this is what we're going to be creating today, and I'm going to be helping you to learn how to utilize Cinema 4D's dynamic engine to create really cool 2D style animations like this guy right here. So basically we have a bunch of shapes filling up a volume that is a little plus sign, and a lot of these little shapes are really happy and fun, different colors, and this is going to be really easy, and I hope opens your eyes to the possibilities of utilizing Cinema 4D for 2D animation. So let's go ahead, create a brand spanking new composition or project, and let's create our little plus sign first. So to do that, I'm going to create a cube. Let's make this about 350 by 350. And then for the thickness and the Z, I'm just going to give it like a value of 25. And to make this a plus sign, I'm just going to hit the C key to make this editable so I can start doing some modeling and go to my polygon mode, do a loop selection here. So U and then L, and then that's the little shortcut key to bring up our loop selection. And select the little outer loop of polygons here, and then I want to extrude this out. So I'll hit M and T and just extrude this out. And you're going to notice that we're kind of just extruding out as another cube, but we need to adjust this little maximum angle. It's basically an angle threshold. And you'll see that once I brought that down, we now don't have this kind of connecting, and we can continue to offset this and extrude this out. And we can get very precise with how much our plus sign goes by just putting in a value here. So maybe I'll offset it by 350, considering that's how we started. Our cube was 350 by 350, so we'll just extend it out 350 more centimeters. And here is our plus sign. So we'll just rename that. And so we can actually see through it, I'm going to turn on this X-ray option so we have our Superman X-ray vision and can see all of the stuff that we're going to be putting inside and filling up this little volume. So let's create just a simple cylinder, make the orientation -Z, and then we're just going to shrink this guy down to say, radius of 35, and then for the height, I'm going to have it just very low, value of 5 centimeters, and this is going to give us enough thickness for the physics simulation. But if we look at it straight on, you're going to see that it's still going to have the illusion of being a 2D object. So just enough thickness there. So now what we're going to need to do is create a whole bunch of these cylinders and generate them and have something emit all these cylinders. And luckily we have the handy dandy particle emitter here. And basically how the emitter works is you place the object of whatever you want to emit as a child of the emitter. And if I hit play, you're going to see that all we have is a bunch of little dots kind of emitting out the back there. And that's not what we want. We actually want to see those cylinder objects. So I'm going to just check on show objects, and now you'll be able to see all of our little cylinders there just flying out into space. And let's actually give our timeline a little bit more buffer to play out. So I'll just type in 250 frames so we can actually see this go to the little stop emission. So at frame 150, that's when the particle emitter stops emitting, and that's it. That's kaput. So what we're going to do is apply dynamics to all of our objects in our scene so we can get that really cool, sweet looking 2D dynamic animation. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and apply my simulation collider body to my plus sign because it needs to be the object that objects are going to collide into and nothing else. And we're also going to apply a emitter. We're going to apply the dynamics tag to the emitter, and we're just going to throw a rigid body tag on this. And so it actually takes into account that there's individual elements underneath it. I'm going to hit have individual elements set to all. And then I'm going to have this tag apply to children. So by placing the rigid body tag on the emitter, and say if I wanted to add different types of cylinders, so maybe a cylinder that's round, so that's a circle. Maybe this is, has less rotation segments here, so maybe it's a, maybe like a pentagon or something like that. And then I could duplicate this again and make this a triangle with 3 rotation segments. So basically I can add a whole bunch of different types of shapes in the emitter. And if I have the dynamics tag on the top there, it'll apply dynamics to all the objects underneath. So just a little workflow enhancer kind of thing. But what you're going to see is that this emitter is just kind of throwing up on the backside of our plus sign. It's not filling up the volume, and that's due to the fact that by default, the shape that's being used for the collision is set to automatic, and this does not take into account the hollowness or the empty, the inside hollow area of an object. So to be able to take that all into account, we'll use a more accurate shape collider or a collision shape, and that is going to be a static mesh or moving mesh. And these are the 2 most accurate forms of dynamic simulation shapes. But since our object will not be moving, it's going to be static, we'll just use static mesh. And now you should see, shabam, we got our dynamics take into account the hollow shape of the inside shape of the plus sign, and it's just kind of filling on up. So we want a whole lot more objects to be emitted in here because we're just filling up this bottom part of it. So we can go ahead and increase the birth rate editor and renderer. You want to make sure these are consistent and maybe crank them up to 25. And now what we're going to do is go ahead and we want some gaps here because right now they're just kind of falling on each other and kind of overlapping. So what I'm going to do is go into our emitters dynamic tab and go into size increment. Now, basically what size increment does is depending on whatever number you add in here. So let's just say I'll add 5 centimeters. Whatever number you add there, it's kind of going to give a 5 centimeter buffer, like a force field, like a little force field kind of thing that's 5 centimeters. And it's going to create all these nice little gaps. But you're going to see that a lot of stuff's happening here. Number one, things are kind of bunching up here and just does not look good at all. So what we're going to need to do is do a bunch of things in our dynamics tag still, and one of those things being going into the staying in the collision tab here. And right now we have some pretty high friction and bounce values. If I just lower them to say 1% on each, and maybe even get rid of the collision noise altogether so there's not a lot of noise happening. You can see now we're starting to build up our objects and things are kind of spinning, but at least we're getting these nice little gaps here, okay? So the first thing I'm seeing is all of these objects are spinning like crazy. So to tamp that down, we're going to go into the Force tab and use this follow rotation here, okay? So what this follow rotation, if I change this to say 10, it's going to try to maintain the original rotation value of when that object was created. So you can see how that's kind of forcing all of these objects to stay more upright and not spin around like crazy. Another thing I can do is make the linear dampening up to say 70%, so we have a lot more these objects aren't kind of moving around and jittering as much, so the linear dampening kind of chills down the little particles from moving too much linearly. So I think that's looking pretty good. The one thing you're noticing is we do not have enough stuff going on, and that's because somewhere along the way I accidentally changed our birth rate editor and renderer from 25 and 25 to 3 and 25. So, and I've had a lot of people, ask questions about, why is things showing up differently in my viewport versus renderer? And this is the main reason. You need to make sure that with objects that have these two different editor and renderer settings, that you make sure that they're the same. So you get an accurate representation of what you're seeing in the viewport, and it's consistent with what you're going to render. So you're going to see that it's just kind of like a fiesta of different shapes popping out all over the place. And this is due to the fact that our emitter shape is fairly small. So if we just crank up the X and Y size here, so we have more of a wider area that our particles can kind of fill up this shape. You can see that we're filling it up a little bit more, but we're losing a lot of these guys. These guys are jumping ship pretty quickly. And what's going to help us to solve that issue is because we have all these objects here and they're flying out pretty fast and they're colliding. And when we have stuff like that happening and a lot of objects and a lot of collisions, we're going to need to go to our Dynamics expert settings. We're going to go to expert mode. So we're going to go to mode, project, and in the project settings here we have Dynamics and then the expert tab. And these two settings right here are very important, and they're basically the sampling, the samples that are being used to execute the dynamics. And the lower the number, the more inaccurate, but the speedier the scene. But if we crank these up pretty high to say 60 and 30, you want to kind of keep them in a 2-to-1 ratio, you're going to see that we're going to get a lot more accurate stuff, and we're filling up everything we had. Oh, we got another guy. Oh, no, another guy shooting out. And this is where we can kind of, we got a lot of people, a lot of these guys kind of jumping ship. And this is where we can go into our birth rate and stop emission, and maybe we're emitting way too much. So let's actually turn on render instances first, so this will speed up a little bit more. And you can see that, all right, we're a couple of these are shooting out. So what we can do is maybe bring down the stop emission. So right now our emitter is emitting until frame 150, and then it's going to stop. And it looks like we fill up our volume here way before that hits 150. So maybe around 120 is where we want to stop this. So let's just play this out. And you see one just shot out there, 2 shot out, 3 shot out, but you can see that we're getting a little bit closer. Maybe we bring down the emission to 100 and see what happens there. And let's just go back to frame 0. So we got 1 that shot out, 2 that shot out, and we're not filling this up anymore. So let's make this 115 maybe, and let's see what's going on here. All right, so it's still shooting out. So now maybe we want to go back into our project expert settings, and not the expert settings, but the dynamic settings, and going to general, and maybe just turning off the gravity altogether and see what's going on there. Because we really don't need gravity if we're trying to fill up this volume. And you can see that just by turning off the gravity kind of helps us a little bit. We still have some of these spinny doodle guys going. Let's actually crank up the time scale and make this fill up even faster. So this is going to double the speed, double the pleasure, and double the fun of your dynamic simulation. And you can see now we're to the point where we only have 3 that are popping out. So now we can go back, and I know it's a little bit of back and forth with doing this. Let me just increase the X and Y size here just a little bit and see if that helps a little bit too. So it looks like we're going to need to, again, adjust the stop emission, so maybe 105. Let's see what happens here. No popping out. No popping out. Okay. So we got to a point tweaking all these settings. Again, a little give and take to try to fill up this volume, and it looks like we're getting pretty dang close. It looks like we can maybe give it 2 more frames and see if we can. It looks like we just need a couple more particles, maybe 2 or 3 more particles to 2 more shapes to fill up the entire volume in a way that looks really good. So I think we're still getting close. We're getting close. Can we push it to 110? So a lot of this is just experimentation. Looks like we flew too close to the sun there, folks. We maybe need to go down to 109 again. So let's see. So a lot of this is just understanding what all of these little settings are. It looks like we got 1 that came out. All right, so 108, and we're just sticking with that. All right, so it looks like we're good with 108. And if we just render this, you can see that we see our cross or our plus sign. So what we're going to need to do is have this not show up in the render. So I'm just going to change this bottom stoplight to red, and that means it will not render in the renderer. And if I just hide this in the viewport as well, we won't see that in the viewport, but I think it's fine to see it in the viewport. Now you can see all of our shapes underneath it and not the plus sign. So this is looking pretty good. And you can, of course, go and we can add maybe a tiny cube. So all of our cylinders are 35 centimeters. So I'll just do 35 by 35. And we have just the height of 5 centimeters. So actually, we need to make this a little bit bigger. I think it's 70 by 70. That looks about right. Looking good. Or, we can actually can we just make the cylinder 4 sides? Yeah, dummy. Yeah, see? There you go. We don't need to make a cube. Just make a 4-sided guy there. And to make maybe little rings, we can go and grab a tube, which is the same as a cylinder, but it's got emptiness inside of it, which is sad. But let's make the outer radius 35. And bring this down like so, maybe 20, and then again give it a height of 5, and place that again. Since we have the dynamics tag on the emitter, we can place any object underneath it to have it included in the dynamic simulation happy fun time. And there we go. So let's just do the finishing touches, and let's create a camera. And one of the, to make this really nice and flat, we're going to use a parallel camera. And you can see how this is going to flatten this all out. If I just zero out the rotation here, you're not going to even notice the extrusions, So I call this the SimCity view, isometric, So parallel camera. Let's go ahead and add a variation shader to color all of this stuff. So I'm just going to create a new material. And this will just be our variation, and we'll load up the color and the luminance, so it's a nice flat, almost like a fill color. That's not going to be affected by lights at all, and not going to have any diffuse shading. I'm going to go and grab my effects, variation, and here's where you can apply a lot of random colors to your objects really easily. And the only way to kind of see it is first you need to apply it to the object. But the only way you can actually see what's going on is by using a rendered view of your viewport. So this is where the interactive render region is going to come in handy. And I'm just going to crank up the quality slider here, this little triangle arrow doodle guy. And there we can see exactly what this is going to look like. And right now it's like happy pastel fun time. And that's kind of the default. It's kind of ugly. But one of the great things about this variation shader is you can actually use a gradient to colorize your objects. So what I'm going to do is just remove this random color, just bring that all the way down to 0, and bring up the strength of this gradient blend. And now you're going to see that we're kind of getting sample colors from the array of all of our gradient colors here. And that's, looking okay. But what I want to do is actually, have no smooth interpolation. What this allows us to do is kind of just choose between either blue or white. But you're actually seeing that we're getting all these little in-between values. And the reason for that is this is actually overlaying on different levels of white. Which is I don't quite understand why that is like that. But the way to fix that is to change your gradient mode from normal to replace. And that will then just use either full blue or full white, and it won't have any middle whitewashed values in between there. So having these no interpolation between colors, you can just randomly choose a bunch of different colors here. And I happen to already have a whole bunch of colors that I already chose, so I'll just gonna load them suckers up. And that's basically it. And that is an easy way to colorize, randomly color all of your objects. And if you don't like that that orientate or that random seed, you can always change the seed. If you want one color more than the others, all you have to do is just give that color a little bit more space on the actual gradient. So right now I'm giving a lot more space to this white color, and you can see the probability of that white color being applied to these objects is greater. But I'm just going to go and right click and just choose distribute knots, and this will evenly give even probability, even odds to be applied to our little particles there. So there you go, using dynamics in Cinema 4D and flat textures, parallel camera to create some really cool filling up of a volume effects that hopefully you can use in your own 2D animations to then incorporate into your After Effects workflow. All right, so hopefully this really opens your eyes to the possibilities of how you can not only use dynamics for a 2D workflow, but how you can utilize Cinema 4D as a whole for your 2D workflow and letting you achieve certain looks and complex animations that would be really, really hard to hand keyframe inside of After Effects, or you may need to then buy an expensive plugin to get that kind of functionality inside of After Effects. So thinking of Cinema 4D as almost a plugin in itself for After Effects, and I always recommend people just buying Cinema 4D because it's better than putting all this money in all these plugins for After Effects when you could just buy a full-blown 3D software and having that full freedom of that 3D world and 3D space, and you're learning a very important skill along the way as well. So if you have any questions about anything I covered, definitely leave them in the comments section below. And if you make anything using these techniques, I always love to see what you guys are making. So please share them with me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitters, Vero, there's new social medias popping up every day, it seems like. So, but yeah, share it with me wherever. And if you like this tutorial, please hit that like button. And if you like what I'm doing here on my channel, please subscribe. Really appreciate all of your views and all of your support. So thank you guys so much. And that's it from me. I'll see you guys in the next tutorial. Bye, everybody.